Alabama takes on LSU. It's time to start talking about the biggest game in the West, and this one's really going to determine the West. It might not put LSU in the game, but it could definitely take Alabama out of the national championship picture. They've got the offense. Bama's got the defense. Vegas, they don't put a lot of stock in Alabama right now. We're going to talk about all of that. And guys, welcome back. Bama, Tailgate, YouTube. We're here. We're talking Crimson Tide football. Roll Tide. If you didn't get the invitation yet, it's on you, because here it is. We want you to be part of the channel. Like and subscribe. If you enjoy the video, give us a thumbs up. Share. Tell all your friends about it. We even had a duck race for subscribers and gave away a Daniel Moore print yesterday. So we got a lot to talk about. Roll Tide right after this. Well, Chad, the old double click. But we're back and we're ready to go. It's been a week off. It's just what happens when you have a week off. Bad shit happens. Got an old fashioned here, and it's it's time now to start focusing on Alabama football again. I didn't know what to do with myself. I had a duck race, and I put the video out. Once we got to 1,000 subscribers, I said we're going to do something special for everyone. We gave away a full-size Daniel Moore print Jalen Hurts, right? Well, we're almost to 2,000. And since it was such a weak response, only 25 people were in the duck race. Did you watch the duck race?
To be honest,
that's the problem.
I
don't even want to comment then.
No,
that's the problem. Weak ass response. I'm going to do another duck race when we hit $2,000. And we'll give away something else. But anyway, Roll Tide, my friend. How you been?
I'm good. After that Tennessee game, Mick, I'm not gonna lie, man. I needed the week off. That was a stretch right there. If you go back and look, I mean, this whole season has been a stretch because it's just been the roller coaster. Everybody preseason, think of the roller coaster we've had, Mick. Preseason, everybody. Oh, national champion Alabama.
Right.
National champion Alabama. SEC champion Alabama. Nick Saban's pissed off. Tommy Rees is going to come in. They're going to do some more creative things on offense, get back to running the football. Offensive line is going to win the Joe Moore Award. They're going to be unbelievable.
Road graders. That's it. That's what Tom Abraham said.
Jalen Milroe's not going to have to figure it out because the running backs and the O-line and the defense are going to be so good.
We don't need an NFL quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, it was, right? Like, that's where everybody's head was. And when you limp into the season, then you go, okay, wow, you blew out MTSU, great, but who cares? Texas comes in, whips your ass. South Florida looks awful. And now you're sitting around going, holy shit, what have we done? We're nothing but an 8-win, 9-win team. This sucks. We're going to be terrible.
Right.
And then you go Ole Miss second half grind. You whip Mississippi State. You beat Texas A&M pretty soundly. A
lot of mistakes, though.
A lot of mistakes, but you had a better performance than the scoreboard
Better
showed.
performance. That's right.
You held on against Arkansas. You survived the punch and came back with your best half of football that was the best half of football maybe in a long time with Alabama.
Yeah.
The way they treated Tennessee. Of course, the penalties are what did that, Mick. I mean, you and I know that, right? Like, it was all penalties and officials. Yeah. That's the only reason.
Oh, that's what they said. That's what they said. Hey, congratulations. They beat Kentucky again.
They survived Kentucky is what they did. But so I take you down that whole road. Does that not feel like a roller coaster? Like, I feel like I've been at Six Flags for 2 months now.
Yeah, right. And Six Flags Atlanta.
I needed the weekend, to be honest. Like, I was gassed just the way this team will do it and treat you. Yeah. But I tell you what, if you go back and ask Chad the night of the Texas game and said, hey, Chad, don't worry about it. In 2 months, you're going to play LSU. It's going to be for the West, assuming Ole Miss loses one more game. It's going to be for the West. you're in the top 10, you're in the national title picture, everything's okay, it's all out in front of you. I might have called you some names. Some
Yeah.
inappropriate names.
It's such a weird situation with the West because Ole Miss, they lost to Alabama, but they beat LSU. And then if Alabama loses to LSU, I mean, how do you determine, right? So let me pull up the standings, the polls right now. And I have said this since Robert from Mobile called. I agree with him. I think Alabama needs style points. This doesn't happen to Alabama a whole lot when they're in that log jam of one-loss teams. Normally, they lead the pack of the one-loss teams, but that continues to be Oregon in the AP poll, and it's Texas in the coaches poll. But Bama's 8th in both, and I know Michigan and Ohio State are going to play. We're going to talk a little bit about Michigan coming up. Florida State continues to roll. Washington's, they got past Oregon. They're in a tough league where there's some upsets. And then Oklahoma lost this week. Obviously Texas without Quinn Ewers, but they're still good. And they beat Alabama. And then Penn State bounced back after their loss. So there we are, number 8. I still feel like it's Dale Earnhardt, Talladega positioning, back of or middle of the lead pack, ready to make your move. I think if Alabama wins out, there's a good chance they're going to get there, but I think they need style points. I'm still
not on that bandwagon. Oregon actually jumped Texas because they beat a better ranked team with Utah. To me, what will be an indicator is, well, one, you've got the college football playoff standings coming out for the first time this week. So you're going to get an indication as to what the committee thinks about. We've been going off of coaches and writers,
Great point.
Which is all we have. But that comes out.
You'll know, though, Chad, you'll know this week if we need style points.
Still don't think you need style.
Yes,
but
you'll know.
I don't think so, because I still look at it, and the more I watch these teams also, Mick, is when I see some of these teams, like Washington doesn't look good anymore. They were pounding people when they were under the radar. They're now struggling to beat Arizona State and Stanford, who are the bottom of the Pac-12. Oregon looks like the better football team that just happened to lose at Washington. Oregon looks better so far this year to me, even though Washington did win that game head-to-head. I get it, and that's why you play the game. Washington deserves to be 5. But when we're talking about what's coming up, see the Big 12 too, Oklahoma is who we thought they were. They are a team that is good, and they played really well, and that's why they beat Texas. But to me, Texas is going to beat Oklahoma if they match up in the Big 12 championship.
Don't count your chickens. I mean, they might lose another game, but I don't know. Oklahoma had their number.
They did. You're right. They did. That's fair. But I look at the rest of these. Georgia, man, Georgia reminds me of Alabama from the past.
I know.
They flip the switch when they want to. I was completely wrong. I was talking to buddies. I thought Florida was actually going to give them a little bit of a game. I didn't have Florida winning, but I had them staying inside the 14.
You didn't have them covering?
No,
Georgia?
No, I didn't.
Sorry, buddy. I should have talked to me.
I know. Yeah, Georgia just flipped the switch. So, I just look at these teams, and I don't have faith that they're going to win out. And it always works itself out, is my point. Because really, again, between Michigan and Ohio State, one of them is going to lose. So So Bama's
that
really
one's
7.
There. Right.
So,
I got
you.
you.
Bama's at least 7. And so Oregon and Washington, they're not going to both go.
But I'm counting both. This is where we will. Okay. We need Georgia to stay at 1 because you got to beat them.
Georgia to be 1. Yes.
Right.
Bama fans should be pulling for Georgia.
That's
every week.
Michigan, Ohio State is one contender. They're 2 and 3, but they're 1.
Winner's going. Neither
Florida State, if they went out, they're in. Right. So then now you got to deal with Washington and Oregon. That's 1. One of those two could go. Right. And then you got Texas hanging around like a booger on the corner of your nose that you don't know about. The fact that they beat Alabama, that's where you worry. If Texas wins out and it's between Alabama and Texas, both of them have conference championships. Even if Alabama beats number 1 Georgia, they lost head-to-head to Texas.
Yep.
They're going.
That's a bad scenario.
And that's why I'm telling you, Alabama is not getting the national respect right now. And a win over LSU is another one of these where they're going to go, well, Alabama should win. If we lose, it's the greatest thing that ever happened to college football because we're out. If we win and it's not a dominant win, they're going to be like, well, Alabama barely got by again. They're no good.
Well, see, but to me, if your scenario plays out, which is very possible, but if your scenario plays out, style points to me wouldn't catapult Alabama over Texas anyway, because they literally beat Alabama in Tuscaloosa.
Right.
But my point is
you could have all the style. Though. You make
I don't
it
think
tougher.
It would matter. I don't think you can make it tough enough in that scenario. If I'm a voter and you got 3 undefeated conference champions, let's say it's Michigan, Florida State, and Washington,
right?
And then you're sitting there with Texas as a 1-loss champ and Alabama as a 1-loss champ. Unfortunately, it's Texas,
right? I'm not
because of the head-to-head.
Unless you make it to where you, by far, Alabama's the best team in the country.
I don't see how they will. Because then you eliminate any.
But you're not going to have a better win, right? But Texas lost to Oklahoma. Say Oklahoma loses a couple more games, right? And Texas wins out, and then Alabama beats Georgia. Bama's loss is still a better loss.
It's a better loss, but it's to that team. Like, you can't.
I know what you're saying, but it doesn't matter. I mean, like
here's the one I'm worried about. Where style points come into play is with Oregon, because Oregon wins the Pac-12, has 1 loss, and Alabama has 1 loss. Neither one of them played each other, right? And so then you end up with a Bama versus Oregon debate.
Right.
That's where your quote unquote style points would come into play. So let's take a look. Oregon would have beaten on that path Washington, because I'm assuming Washington gets back to the Pac-12 title game. If you don't mind scrolling down, I think Oregon State
they lost yesterday.
List. They did. Oregon State would be on that list. Yep.
Number
Utah
16 here.
They're there.
And number 19 here.
UCLA's on there. And I think Oregon beat them, or maybe they play them. And then USC, or maybe they don't play UCLA this year, but they do play USC. They'll smoke them. My point is here, Oregon's going to have 3, maybe 4 top 25 wins, okay? Alabama is going to have the same, though, because you would have to have beaten LSU, beaten Tennessee, beaten Ole Miss, right? There's 3, and then you'd have to beat number 1 Georgia, which is 4. So if
which has had a long ass winning streak since Alabama beat them last time, which I think is going to happen, by the way.
The reason I think that Alabama would get the nod over Oregon is because on the final day of the year, Alabama will have beaten the number 1 team in the country that has a, whatever they have at that point, 29, 30 game win streak.
Right. If they do,
lost.
Yeah.
Right. I'm obviously assuming that. I just think that last minute win gives Alabama the push over 1-loss Oregon. Yeah, that's tough. The only thing they would really be
they have a damn good conference this year, though.
They do. So, but that's why I compared like top ranked teams.
I'm just telling you, it's not clear cut, Cat. It's not clear cut.
Here are the arguments. Oregon can say our only loss was by 3 points where we missed a last second field goal on the road at Washington. They were on the road. Alabama's only loss will be at home, though, to Texas. The advantage Bama would have in that argument is Bama could say, yes, but we went out and scheduled Texas.
Right.
We didn't have to play Texas.
Right.
Hey, Oregon, who was your non-conference group this year?
You're right. Not a conference game this year.
Right. Okay. Like Bama could say, we could have just scheduled, South Alabama or Louisiana, the Raging Cajuns, or we could have just scheduled, somebody else and steamrolled them.
You're right.
And fine. then we're undefeated. And we're not even talking about this. So it's an interesting argument, but I still just looking at, and I get what you're saying on the style points. I just don't think it's going to matter. I don't think it's going to come into play.
We'll see.
I don't think it's necessary.
1 week at a time, Chad. Well, let me put this back up here one last second, because Alabama is number 8 and LSU is jumping into this mix here at number 13. So they're the second highest rated 2-loss team. They lost to Ole Miss, who's number 11, and they lost to Florida State, who's number 4. So going into this game, they got what I call the ESPN push right up the ladder. Game day is going to be in Tuscaloosa on Saturday. You got
I was surprised by that.
Well, it's still Alabama LSU, and it does mean something. But a lot of the talk around college football this week was about Michigan, who's being investigated by the NCAA for sending a guy that used to be in the military that his coaching job is basically deciphering signs, stealing signs from other teams. And apparently the guy was at the Alabama-Georgia championship game, the one that Alabama lost. He was at the championship game last year, like scouted out all of these like Michigan opponents. And that's against the rules. And I heard a Tennessee guy saying that he felt like maybe last year South Carolina might have gotten some help from Michigan. They scored 6 points, and then all of a sudden they just rocketed. They put it all together. I don't know. Brian Kelly, the head coach at LSU, was asked about it, and he was kind of like, hey, it doesn't matter. That was something that they used to do, and maybe they, whatever. Nick Saban was asked about it, and he was like, he wasn't really aware of much. He didn't want to comment on it. Some of the coaches in the Big Ten are pissed. They've been alluding to this. They knew about it. They weren't surprised. Who knows what's going to happen?
Yeah.
But at the same time, it is pretty crazy to think about Michigan getting busted or possibly getting busted for stealing signs. And, Coach Prime said, hey, they could steal our signs, but they still got to stop it. I don't know where I stand on this, man. I mean, I just don't. But Jim Harbaugh he'll do anything type of guy.
He will. Yeah, he definitely will. Well, I think this. I think if you here's it's one of those things where how we always say talk about cheating before there was NIL,
right?
About paying players, and then all it takes is one school getting caught, and then their fan base is everybody does it.
Yeah, right.
I mean, that's kind of the answer, right? So my thing with this is, to me, there is no doubt that I'm sure multiple schools do it. I'm not saying Alabama does or doesn't. I'm just saying I could potentially see this taking place a lot. Coaches, programs, interns, universities, whatever, always trying to get the next leg up on the opponent and whoever they're going up against, and trying to better themselves. My thing is, and people should go back and watch game day from last I don't think it wasn't yesterday, Saturday. It was the week before, the Tennessee weekend for Alabama. Reese Davis was spot on. He told Desmond Howard, who's god awful at his job. He told Desmond Howard.
What do you think of that show? What do you think of that show?
I want to get to that actually in a second. That's a really good topic.
Right.
Dez is defending Michigan. Obviously, he played for Michigan, Heisman Trophy winner. And he's defending Michigan. Kind of the same thing like a fan base would do. And that's what drives me nuts about Dez, is because he gets in his feelings. Reese Davis backs up and says, look, I got it. Everybody does it. That's fine. The rule is you can't do it. It's not a gray area. It's black and white in the NCAA handbook. You can't do this. So if you get busted, if it's apparent and evident that you did this and you committed this infraction, you should have to pay the price for it. You can't say it's like going down the interstate. You can't tell the state trooper that everybody going by you was also doing 78. And you
Right.
just happen to be the one to get busted. The fact is you were going 78.
Right.
You get a ticket. Same thing here. I got it. I'm all for changing the rule as well. Go to the helmet communication like they do in the NFL. Do that. Get rid of the sign stealing. But to me, it probably does happen. And it sucks, but it's you toe the line. You know what you're doing when you do it. But also Harbaugh said, I believe Reese said it was 5 weeks before this took place. He said, we go to the nth degree to follow every letter of the law to make sure we're compliant. Well, you obviously don't, Jim. You just don't. It's not even close, man. Like, this is so apparent and so obvious. But when you circle back to, did it have an impact on other teams and programs and whatnot? I mean, Shane Beamer has a history of being busted for this type of stuff. I've been laughing.
Really?
He does. He was caught as a Virginia Tech grad assistant, I believe it was, on getting inappropriate game film on a future opponent. And he was fined $25,000. You know, I'm sure Frank Beamer wrote the check for that. But that's what happened. And so now he's the head coach at South Carolina. Spencer Rattler does look like a Heisman Trophy winner. In that one game, they hang 63 points on Tennessee. I think there was like 4 games prior that it would have taken for them to get to 63 points. So, you know, did they have
could be something there, right?
Yeah. I mean, the evidence and the stats and the, you know, circumstantial evidence and just everything, the context around it, it adds up. It makes a lot of sense. I'm laughing my ass off all week because Tennessee fans are losing their mind thinking they got robbed of a national championship. And that's the greatest part of all of it is that somehow
it could have been something was effed up though. I mean, you got to admit, like no one saw that coming. And I know Tennessee, the word is that Tennessee had a locker room issue and it affected their defense going into that game. And then obviously Hendon Hooker got injured. And honestly, at that point, you know, I didn't have a problem with Tennessee. I mean, I know they beat Alabama and they got, I thought the officiating in that game was not bad, but that was a hell of a team, the way they could score points. And that was such a weird game for them. Yeah. And then Hooker got hurt. And I mean, they weren't the same team anymore. But what if that is true?
I mean,
do you have a problem with it? I mean, I guess other coaches don't seem to have a problem with it.
As far as like, if you're doing it, like, do you mean if you're stealing signs, do I have a problem?
Yeah, I mean, is that an issue? I mean, like, yeah, is that an issue?
I mean, it's one of those things where I don't really care if you do it. Like, I don't care. You know, that's more my point. Like, I just don't care. But I mean, if you get busted for it, you got to pay the penalty because you're doing something that's illegal according to the rule book. I'm basically saying, I'll give you this as my best answer. I don't agree with the rule book. I think the rule book is outdated. That's my problem. Is that this was a rule back in, I want to say it was the early 90s is when this came out. And so they did it because I think the reason for the rule was travel costs. Like universities with a lot of money were able to get the upper hand on schools with not a lot of money because they could send interns, coaches, etc., send them out, get the advanced signs, game tape, etc., whatever. And then that was it. So I just think the rule is outdated and they probably just need to do away with it and go to some form of communication system.
Yeah.
So I just have a bigger problem with the rule and the rule book being old than I do with somebody doing it, I guess.
Okay. And I don't know. Like I told you, I don't necessarily have an opinion on it. I just don't know how much it affects the game. I mean, obviously it's against the rules and I'd love to see Michigan pay the price for cheating, but you know, maybe it's one of those things like, you know, like Coach Prime said, you still got to stop it, right? You may know it's going to be a sweep, but you have to stop it. Although for me, I think it's a lot easier to play defense when you know what play's coming. I mean, you know, especially
that's kind of a lazy answer from Prime.
I know.
Lazy answer.
All right, Saban,
Wait, do you want to
Our
talk about game day real quick?
Yeah, talk about game day because Pat McAfee says he might not come back. Yeah, you see that? He said he's like kind of like, and to me, he's the best thing about the show these days.
Yeah,
that's
so
me.
Do you mind? You tell me. Do you like McAfee? Obviously, you do with that.
I love him.
Then.
Well, here's what I think, man. Like I'm so sick of the Tom Rinaldi telling me everybody's sob story. We all have a tough life, and we all have our stories, right? But every single week, and I know he's not on there anymore, but it's like, I don't want to cry. I just want to watch football, right. And then how do you say this? You get old, and it's tough to do this job when you have a tough time communicating, right? And I love the hats, and I love the whole thing with Lee Corso, but he can barely communicate anymore. Yeah. And then Kirk Herbstreit, I like him. I like Reese. I mean, obviously Reese is an Alabama guy. But I just feel like, man, I just kind of feel like the show is it's not the must-watch TV that it used to be for me. So I don't watch it that much anymore. I actually have my radio show go up against it every single Saturday in a lot of markets across Alabama because I feel like Alabama fans want to hear about Alabama. They don't give a shit about all these other schools and everything else that's going on. And I think those guys are knowledgeable. I think those guys, they don't have the Bear on there anymore, which I always liked him. And then McAfee came in and it was like, okay, you know what? This guy kind of like a fresh of breath air on a show that I like. And I'll say this. Yeah, you know what I mean? Breath of fresh air. But I'm not an ESPN guy, man. I don't like their programming. I don't like the direction of the I just don't like ESPN anymore. I used to like it. Not a big ESPN guy. I do like the football games. But I just it feels like a soap opera network to me, And with that said, if I watch it, it's not like I hate it. And it's not like Fox's pregame's any better. But for me, I would rather hear Alabama. And in a world where there's just not a lot of good shows on anymore because they're worried about selling and sponsors instead of like content, I felt like it was slipping, and I thought that he did a good job. So I liked him. And when I heard he might not sign his contract, I was like, and I'll say this, Chad, the last thing is like they had this, I think they were in Texas. And they were at the Texas-Oklahoma game, and McAfee had this big-ass drumstick, 2 of them, and he handed one to Herbstreit, and then he handed another one to Herbstreit like he was going to hold 2, and Herbstreit just kind of like gave him that like look down at the drumstick and like blew him off. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to the McAfee party. I'm taking the double drumsticks that are way too big. And the elite, like I'm too good for that. I'm this guy, I'm not with that. And I feel like that's where game day is. And that's why I like McAfee. Is that a good explanation?
Yeah, you pretty much nailed it. Here's the thing with what's going on. And this is not just ESPN. This is kind of everybody at the moment. And what's happening is in today's world, and think back 30 years, that's when ESPN College Game Day kind of got going and gained a lot of momentum and then started bouncing around to campuses, and it grew and it became this must watch, must attend. It was like a bucket list item just to attend ESPN's College Game Day. And what's happened is back then, ESPN really had the widest reach. I mean, they were the favorite sports network everywhere. There were no other shows competing against them. They were killing it in ratings. They had all these contracts. They had everything. Well, now you fast forward to today. There's now multiple shows. There's also different streaming rights. There's also streams and shows and things like McAfee that don't have to be, even though McAfee did sign an ESPN contract, there's his show and other shows that don't have to be regulated. Barstool's a great example, that aren't regulated by the FCC because they go on streaming services like YouTube. And so you get different brands and you get different personalities, and you see a different side of people, and you see people that are probably more relatable. So my biggest thing is when you get into these situations with like an ESPN, everybody has what I call basically like sports church. And what I mean by that is you have to wear the suit and the tie. You have to act a certain way. You have to be careful about what you say. You have to present yourself in a certain way. And a lot of times these guys can't act or be or say either what they really think or who they really are.
Great
They
point.
can't just be themselves. And so I think that this alternate broadcast world of streaming and the reach that social media has and YouTube has, Mick, you and I talk about it all the time. When we were doing play-by-play, and you're still doing play-by-play, back then we would have to carry suitcases worth of equipment around, and it would take a long time to set up to be able just to broadcast something. Today, all I need is my laptop and a microphone, and I'm good to go. I'm locked in. We're calling a game.
It's crazy.
And so I just think that that technology and the change in the world and the social media has allowed other personalities to now compete. And I think ESPN and the game day setup is getting exhausting. And I think that's just it. I think people are tired of going to sports church, Mick. They don't want to see Kirk Herbstreit. And I think Kirk is probably a phenomenal guy. And I bet off camera, Kirk is a little bit different than what he is on camera.
Right.
Because you can see him want to let that out some. But on game day, he is right here. You know, like he is in the lane, and that's it. McAfee, that dude's going to take his shirt off. He's going to go jump in the Cumberland River.
Right.
He's going to rub his nipples. Like he's going to do all kinds of stuff.
I know.
Right.
And I'm not even saying that I need all that, but I get that's who he is. And I like that.
But this is the point. Go back, Mick, to the Friday before the Tennessee game. Okay. You, myself, Bear, and Huber, we're hanging out at Innisfree, and we do a 30-minute post radio show live on YouTube. And we're sitting there. You guys are taking shots. We're cussing. We're telling stories. We're talking to a former national champion. We're talking to girls at a high top behind us. We're talking to an old guy who wants swag, who's just there for the party. We're in a bar. We're in an atmosphere. And it was great. And it's the reason it's great is because that's how people truly are. They want to sit around, drink, cuss, tell stories, and one up you on your story versus theirs or vice versa.
Yeah.
And that's what we do, right? And that's what makes sports like this giant community that everyone loves to be a part of. And I think when you can bring that, that's what McAfee does. He brings this different, like, oh, that's my guy right there. And that's why I think those little after show type things that we do, I think people like them and relate to them. I think that's why Barstool is so successful.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. And I've been stuck in that world too, man, where you're afraid to say something, you know, when you work for, you know, Crimson Tide Sports Network or SEC Network or, you know, the Cubs or all the stuff that I've done. And it's like, you're constantly on alert that you just don't want to hurt anyone's feelings or offend them or whatever. And it's like, I mean, just be yourself. And a lot of that stuff takes care of itself. With that said, it's great owning everything because you know what? I mean, you get to do it the way you want to do it, you know? And I think that's how McAfee feels. Like he kind of is like, hey, look, I own this. And if they don't like the way I'm doing it, and I guess there was like some kind of poll that he didn't poll very well in.
Yeah, like people didn't like
Get that out of here, man. That's bull crap. All right. I didn't believe that anyway. All right, let me get to the next thing here.
All right.
Saban wants the same crowd environment at Bryant-Denny for LSU that he got at Tennessee. This tells you that he knows that for Alabama to win, the crowd's got to be a part of it, which I know he's right. And that means for those of you that don't like the stand,
get your ass up, guys.
So get rid of your tickets.
Jesus.
That's been our biggest issue. That's why Alabama games that's why Alabama Stadium isn't number one when it comes to like the noise factor, because we got we got a nice stadium. We got just, you know, it's because there's a group of people that want to go like they're sitting in their living room. And if you go to the games, you got to make noise. That's kind of part of it. And so he's asking for that same environment. Your thoughts on that?
Oh, you know Mudcat, right? I mean,
Oh, I know him.
yeah,
Of course
you know
I do.
Mud. You know Mud. So
It's your
I was
dad.
talking. I was talking. That's
Your brother.
OG
No,
Cat.
that's your
Yeah,
brother. That's
yeah,
your brother.
brother,
That's your brother. Yeah, he is
Mudcat's
a
brother.
crazy dude. Yeah.
He's nuts. I got a good off the YouTube story for you, off the channel story for you at another time that I just heard today,
Oh,
by the
boy.
way.
I've
Yeah.
sat next to him before.
Yeah, it's something. So he and I were talking after the Tennessee game, and I told him, I said, one thing that I was a little annoyed about is early in that Tennessee game, I thought the crowd was flat. I thought that there were moments when it was loud. Now, second half, that place was nuts. It was an absolute shit show. I mean, it was bonkers in the second half. But in that first half, they just didn't have it, or not, I guess, to what I was expecting for such an important game. Now, LSU is going to be a night game. There's going to be a lot more brown water and suds and Yingling flights consumed leading up to Saturday night when it's under the lights and the whole deal. That's a whole day of tailgating. So it'll naturally be a little bit louder. But he made a comment, and I'm curious to see your reaction on this, Mick, because when he said it, I kind of agreed with him. And that was, he said, Alabama football, because of our success and the popularity and Nick Saban, and also living in the South, Alabama football has kind of become a destination. Like, it's not the same rabid fan base like LSU. It's more of a destination thing, because now if you're a kid in California, like, think of what Alabama has done as far as growing the
I know
population.
what he means. I know
But
what
he's
he
like,
means.
people think it's now like cool to go to Tuscaloosa, go there for 4 years, wear the cowgirl hat and the boots or the overalls or the whatever, and now it's like, oh, destination. This is cool. Roll
Right.
Tide, y'all, and then have fun and go to the games and then go home because you don't really care when you're like, oh, that sucks. Man, I was crying over games
We're
at
from
11 years
Jersey,
old.
but we go to Bama. Our
Right.
kids go to Bama.
Right. I was crying over games at 11
no
years old.
offense to Jersey, but that's what he's saying, right?
That's exactly it. But we don't have that same, like, I use myself as the example. I was legitimately pissed off, cussing at 11 years old and crying when we would lose games.
Yeah.
And we don't have that same fan base, to me. It doesn't. And I think he's on to something there. That's just his opinion, and I happen to agree with that one. I think that's part of the problem, is that we've become so successful as a program and a university that has attracted so many people from outside, but those people don't understand what it's like to be noisy and what it's like to be crazy and to create an environment that Nick Saban's asking for.
Well, when I transferred in 20 some years ago, we sucked. We were actually good, but we weren't that good. Like, I got there just in time to watch Gene Stallings retire. So my
that sucks.
Yeah. So I got there, and it was like my first game was the Iron Bowl that Gene Stallings called it quits after the damn game. Oh, so I got there to lose to Peyton Mannings. And it was the first game I ever went to. And so, but I know what you mean. Like, I see so many like out of state fans and stuff, but look, if you go to school and you bring the heat and you bring the passion, I'm fine with that. But I know what he's saying, like when they didn't go through the Shulas, the Mike Prices,
the Dubose,
the Dennis Franchione, the Dubose, like the Dubose thing, like they don't get that, how appreciative we all are that we win all the time. Or we have, and now it's kind of, we're coming back down on the other side of this, like there's a lot of close games in there, but Nick figures out a way to win. No, I don't know. I mean, I think it's a case by case. I just don't want to lump everyone in the same boat, but I thought he meant like you go to a game and there's all these like outsiders, like I'm not really a fan of either team, but I just wanted to come down and do this. I wanted to see an Alabama game, and it's like 15 guys from like North Dakota, and you're like, all
You
right, well,
get
man,
that too, though.
yeah.
You get that
And
too.
and it's and when this started, and you and I, we sat next to each other in 09.
Yeah.
And we're there in the Rose Bowl when Bama won it. You wouldn't have sold those tickets to anybody for anything.
No.
And then we were together again when Alabama beat LSU, and we were together again when Alabama beat Notre Dame. And
Weren't
you're
you
laughing because
Brando in the Superdome or something?
I did. I high-fived him. But my whole point is the process was so important to us because we had been through all the bad times.
Yeah.
There's kids that they don't know of Alabama losing games. There was, there's a whole generation of kids that Arkansas never beat Alabama. I was there when they lost, and so part of that is that's the price of success. I mean, look at our country right now. We're in the best country ever, and people don't appreciate it because it's been so good for so long. I mean, you know what I mean? Like you find reasons not to like it, but damn,
Mick,
I mean, it's a pretty good place. Winning doesn't always bring out the best in everybody. Like a lot of times winning brings out kind of complacency.
Think about this, Mick. There's not a freshman at Alabama that hasn't been to a bowl game.
Yeah.
Like the freshman class at Alabama has been their entire life is what I meant to say. Their entire life, they've never not seen Bama in a bowl game because 03 was the last time Bama didn't go. And so you look back and you think about that. I mean, I remember there were years where you were just happy to be bowl eligible. Like
I went to the games.
Yeah. We've been to Shreveport twice and 3 times. That's how you know. That's how you know.
I was there 3. Were you there 3?
No, I was there 2.
I was there 3. I went with Tom Canterbury and Vince Allen to the first one. I mean, think about that for a punishment. I'm just kidding.
I missed what was it? The Colorado game is what I
Oh, so you went to the you went to the you went to the 14-13 Iowa State.
I was there.
Okay, I was there for. I went with Cheryl Yingling to Colorado because we won, and then I was there when we lost to Oklahoma State because some guy yelled at me, "Roll Tide down the hole." No, roll Tide down the bowl.
Around the bowl and down the hole.
Yeah, something like that. That's it. Yeah. So I was like, man, I never heard that. Like, you guys are 7 wins and we got 6. Like, okay, Anyway, that's some great points there. Now we've got to create that environment because LSU's coming to town, and it's time to start talking about Alabama and LSU because that's happening Saturday night at Bryant-Denny Stadium. Were you surprised at all that Alabama was just a 4.5-point favorite? And the reason I say that, Chad, and you've been a guy who has spent your life in casinos. You were raised on a craps table and at a slot machine. No one knows blackjack like you do.
Yeah.
You've been gambling on sports before it was win. Even right. Yeah, no, I've seen you win. I've seen your dad win before.
Yeah. It's true.
And 4.5 tells me that Vegas has Alabama as like a 1-point favorite.
Yeah, I think it's more of a toss-up game.
Flip a coin.
Yeah, it is. I'm kind of surprised with Vegas, to be honest with you, because it's so weird. Alabama against. Look at the big games they've had: Ole Miss, Texas A&M, and Tennessee. Right, like those were the 3. Ole Miss and Tennessee ranked opponents. Texas A&M barely outside the top 25 at that time, and still a tough opponent from a defensive standpoint and going on the road there. But when you look at those, like Vegas, it was weird. They were almost begging you to bet against Alabama. Like Vegas opened the line against Ole Miss at 11, coming off of the South Florida game. It was bet down to 7. Everybody in the world was on Ole Miss, Alabama won by 14.
Right.
Texas A&M, Bama is 2.5. Didn't it come down to like 1? And then it went back to 2, 2.5.
But you also had the weird stuff about
that whole
about
injury
Milroe's
rumor.
injury, which
Right.
I'm still not dismissing. I may be the only guy, and I've spent my life in media, and people that I trust and know tell me I'm wrong. I'm not wrong.
On
Something
that one,
was there. Something was there.
Yeah, I don't doubt it. But Milroe, I think, is great now.
He's going to be fast again this week.
Yeah, they had designed runs for him against Tennessee, which
you saw
okay.
you saw the speed was different. The speed for a couple games wasn't there, and then last week it was kind of there. You watch, he's going to have the burst again.
Well, and then the Tennessee game, Bama was 9.5, and it got down to what, 8.5 at kickoff, and everybody's looking around going, I mean, I know Tennessee got smoked by Florida on the road, but man, like 8 points, like, and Bama was coming off a 3-point win against Arkansas. Like, is this, everybody's on Tennessee again.
Right.
And Bama ends up winning by 2 touchdowns. So it's a weird spot, because it's almost like Vegas wants everybody to take LSU.
But they're telling you because they know that Bama has issues.
Yeah. And Bama does have issues.
They do.
And also too, Bama, let's face it. All right. Ole Miss is not, they are more of a running team offensively. And people say, oh, Lane Kiffin and all this stuff. Lane Kiffin likes to run the ball, guys. And that feeds into what Alabama does well on defense. They stop the run pretty well.
Right.
Texas threw the ball, and they threw it well. That was only the second game of the year. Against Joe Milton in Tennessee, Tennessee threw the ball well, but it did get shut down in the second half, and they held Tennessee to under 50 yards until those final 2 possessions. So LSU, though, is going to come out, and they average over 500, and I think it's 50 yards of offense per game. They're number 1 in the country in points scored at 47. They're number 1 in the country in yards per game at the 550 plus. LSU is going to put up some points, unfortunately. They just are. It's going to be really hard to stop them. And their ground game, they average over 200 yards on the ground every game.
Yeah.
So this is going to be a spot too where Alabama, Mick, you talk about the medicine, the elixir.
I call it the elixir.
Yeah.
That's the run game. That's pounding the run.
Bama's going to have it because
run the damn ball.
They got, they got to control the clock, and they got to keep LSU's offense off the field and minimize the number of possessions they have. And so it's going to be a big game of chess. And a lot of pressure on that defense. That's the biggest thing that worries me with the line and this game in general is Alabama hasn't faced an offense that can air it out like this, other than Texas and Tennessee. Tennessee, they were weak in the first half. They got better in the second, but it's going to be a test. That's for sure.
So I agree. It's Alabama's defense against LSU's offense. Jaden Daniels was good last year against Alabama, but he wasn't great. He was good. He ran the ball. We had him beat, and we let him off the hook.
Yeah.
This defense is better. I think that, just talking to Jake Coker on the shameless plug on my own channel, Elephant in the Room podcast on Roll Tide Pods, part of Disrupt the Media. Jake says that the off weeks are very physical for Alabama, that they are back to fundamentals, and that you're looking forward to playing someone because you're tired by the time that the weeks are over. I'm sure that hasn't changed.
Yeah.
And it's Alabama and LSU, so I get it. LSU does a lot of really good stuff on offense, but I watched the Florida State game. And when Daniel started getting hit, he was a different quarterback in the second half. Yep. Alabama's going to have to be physical when they attack Jaden Daniels. They're going to have to. They're going to have to put a hat on him. Yep. He basically got beat up in that Florida State game and didn't want any in the second half. And then against Ole Miss, he played a great game, but Ole Miss scored more points than they did because their defense isn't as good as it's been in the past. Alabama's got the capability of doing the same thing. It's in Tuscaloosa. And I love it when you go into these games and you're like not counting on Alabama's offense. Their offense showed you in the second half against Tennessee that they're starting to figure a lot of things out. And I don't know. I feel good about Alabama going into this game. I don't know why. I mean, we're a weekend. We got a lot to talk about between now and Saturday. But I'm glad we had the week off after beating Tennessee, because it's like that loudmouth. You lost to that loudmouth, and then you went and knocked him out. Now and so you wanted to enjoy that a little bit. Now you got to get focused on LSU. Beat you last year with a team that wasn't that good. They're actually, one of the better 2-loss teams in the country this year, and they got a great offense. And so they're going to be ready to go. I mean, they're going to play us tough, but I think we're going to be ready to go too.
Yeah, both teams will be ready. That's another thing that makes this game so interesting and intriguing every year, is that both teams always get a bye.
Yeah.
Going into this game.
Maybe not fresh.
Yeah, maybe not with like the COVID years where you had the weird schedule, but traditionally you get a week off after Tennessee and before LSU. That probably changes, with the new schedule starting next year. But when you look at that, it's just like, man, two teams licking their chops for 2 straight weeks, ready to hit somebody else. You're going to get the best of both. Brian Kelly is a fantastic coach. He had Notre Dame playing for a national championship. He had them in a playoff another time. He was able to beat Alabama last year, although Alabama last year, that was actually not one of Bryce's best games. If you remember that first drive of the game, he actually threw a pick in the end zone. Now he made up for it in other ways later in the game. But there was something about that game for Alabama that just
terrible job by Bill O'Brien in that game too. One of the worst game plans. I mean, he looked like he was. It was just no creativity at all in that game plan.
Correct. Well, and that's the thing, is that LSU's defense this year is so bad that's why I'm looking at Alabama and really trying to control the clock, dominate the line of scrimmage, and run the football. You're definitely going to see throws. It's not like Alabama's going to abandon it, but I think if you just look and you say, hey, keep our defense fresh, keep their defense tired, keep our defense off the field, keep their defense on the field, and I truly could see Alabama going back and ending up with some 12, 13, 14, 15 play drives against LSU's defense, because they're just not that good, which is crazy to say about LSU, right? Like, I always think of how good their defense has been, and it just hasn't been the case. So it's going to be fun. I'm not going to do any predictions right now, but I do think Bama has an edge. Just the defense over theirs, being at home, being a night game, putting things together offensively. I think LSU's offense is better, but I think Bama's defense is better. And I think the gap is closer where Bama lacks in comparison versus where LSU is weaker than Alabama on defense. I think there's a wider gap there.
All right. Is this going to be the game that the SEC schedule eliminates? And let me say this. Next year, they are playing. So they are on the schedule. We don't have the time yet. But after next year, everything's going to be different, right? Western Kentucky, USF, at Wisconsin. They'll play Mercer. They'll play Auburn, obviously, Georgia, Missouri, South Carolina. They'll be at LSU, at Oklahoma next year. We know that. I don't know all the dates on that. I don't think that's been announced. But
that's
after that, that's a fun schedule. After that, this is the one that I'm going, I don't want Auburn and I don't want Tennessee taken away. But if I'm Alabama, I'm going, you know what, though? I'm not playing LSU every year. I've been playing Mississippi State for over 100 years. They're they're an hour and 30 minutes away from Tuscaloosa. We got to have that game every year. That's a dub for us, or pretty close to it, but it's a rivalry. And I think that's where where Saban's kind of been like, whoa. you guys aren't going to stack our schedule against us. And I think that's what the holdup's been on kind of saying, hey, we're going to do 6 rotating and 3 regulars, or we're going to do something different. If I'm Alabama, Mississippi State's going to be that other school, and it ain't going to be LSU. With that said, it's been a lot of fun since Nick Saban took over at LSU.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with you. Of the 3, the Auburn, Tennessee, LSU, I mean, this is the one I'm okay losing. It's not one I want to lose. I actually enjoy it. But it just, I don't know. I don't have thinking back. I mean, I just don't have the hatred, like when you saw LSU on the schedule, it wasn't necessarily hatred. It was just more, man, these guys have been good for 20 years and it's just always a good game.
Right.
Or it's always a fun game. Their crowd's nuts. Death Valley is nuts. They've had some characters as their head coaches with Les Miles and Ed Orgeron and, Brian Kelly. Brian Kelly's the biggest misfit, I think, in college football as far as head coach fitting in with a program.
Right.
Like I would look at Brett Bielema and I'm like, yeah, that guy belongs at Arkansas. Like that guy fits right in. Like that's an Arkansas guy right there. You look at Saban. Saban fits in Alabama, an elite traditional powerhouse. You look at LSU and I just feel like Brian Kelly a lot of times is probably looking around and watching the fans or the, just the attitudes and the way they act and the things.
Is he doing that fake accent?
He might. Yeah, he might be talking about his family down in Louisiana.
Let me bring this up. Let me bring this up for you, Cat. And I call this guy Catfish. Do you remember being in the limousine? Okay, do you remember the limousine? Maybe. Okay, maybe. We're in the limousine. Shula's head coach. Last time Shula's head coach.
Yeah.
Alabama's at LSU.
Yeah.
OG Cats. Your dad's he's outfitted us up into this Hummer limo from New Orleans.
Yeah, I do remember this.
To LSU, and we're rolling in.
This was pre-drinking, but yes.
Was this pre-drinking for you?
Oh, no. I was drinking. I'm just saying we probably weren't to that.
Well, we're in the limo. We're in the limo
limit yet,
and
okay.
that LSU guy starts beating on the window, and we we pull the window down. This guy's got this giant Gatorade bottle of something, and he's like, he wants to see inside the tinted windows, and we're stuck in traffic out.
Important.
Yeah, we're stuck in. Well, it was us two. And we're stuck outside of Tiger Stadium. We're stuck outside of Tiger Stadium, and we're trying to get to basically where the guy can drop us off. And this LSU fan, like, window down, looks in, sees we're Alabama guys, and he starts cussing us. And then what did he do, Chad? Do you remember this?
I don't know. What was
he
it?
handed me the Gatorade bottle, and we all swigged it and gave it back to him. That's why I love these guys, man. Like, this is such a different rivalry than any other rivalry in any other sport that I'm around. Like, they don't want you at their tailgate, and then they're going to hand you a cup of gumbo. You know what I mean? A bowl of gumbo. Like, here's some etouffee. Like, they hate you, but yet they still will give you some of their tiger tail or gator tail. Like, they're actually pretty cool. And I like that about them. Like, they're fun people.
They are funny people. I told somebody today, cause they were asking, about Bama and LSU. And, I said, LSU, they're like college football's version of Philadelphia Phillies fans.
Yeah.
Like that, they're just nuts, right? They're just nut jobs. I guess the other thing too with LSU, you talk about a rivalry, and it is a little, and Alabama has Nick Saban now, which makes it a little bit of a deeper cut. But I don't think they would care. Like, they do this with everybody. Like, they would cuss you if you were an Arkansas fan hanging out down there, or if you
Right.
were a Florida fan, or if you were a Mississippi State fan. Like, that's just who they are and what they do. Like, you're just not wearing purple and gold. So
Right.
therefore you get cussed. Hey, and by the way, here's my Gatorade bottle.
Tiger bait. Tiger bait.
Yeah, they love it.
The other story is this show ends, and I don't know how many of you guys are like here for the entire hour that we did tonight, but we haven't talked Alabama football really in a week. We did a duck race yesterday, and we gave and a lot of you guys didn't do it, and you missed out on what was really fun. Jonathan Hurst though won the Daniel Moore print. You and I, after an Alabama win against, you know this one, against LSU, I don't even remember what game it was. And we're in.
I think it was 08.
Okay, it was 08. So it was 08.
It was
That's
Saban's
right.
first game there.
Okay, yeah, you're exactly right. It was 08. John Parker Wilson into the pile for the touchdown in overtime. You and I were sitting together. They missed the field goal to win it. The place went nuts. It was so loud. And then we score in overtime and we win the football game. You and I end up on Bourbon Street of all places because you influenced me. You wanted me to go back to Pat O'Brien's. You wanted me to try Hurricanes again. After what happened in 06 when I was down there and I threw up after the hot dog stand and the Hurricanes, you brought me back down there again. You and I, it's got to be like 3 a.m. and we're walking through Bourbon Street. It was Canal. Okay, so we're down there in the quarter. It smells like shit. There's like just like your feet are sticking to the pavement. It's kind of scary. And you look at me and you say,
Mick, this is what hell looks like.
People are running up like are you Alabama fans?
I mean, they're yelling at us. They're like yelling at us, cussing us, mad about Saban, mad about being ranked #1, mad about everything. And then 2 minutes later, the guy's like, "Can I get a cigarette?" You know?
Yeah,
he's like,
"You got to change. You got to change."
But then he's like, "Hey, go try this place over there. It's great, man. They'll take care of you like they're buddies again."
I know.
But you're like, dude, it's 3 a.m. I don't know that they're gonna take care of us
I know.
at 3 a.m. But no, it's.
I was there with you though. When you said hell, I was like, "This is probably what hell's like." It was dark.
This is what hell looks like.
It was scary.
It was,
and we couldn't get back to our hotel fast enough.
Yeah, it was rough. That was a crazy, crazy weekend. But yeah, it's just I kind of have grown out of my New Orleans phase.
Yeah,
like I can't go back. Like I can't go back to New Orleans anymore. I had some great memories in New Orleans, but I can't go back there anymore. But you walk around there and you're just like, and that's the other thing, like on the rivalry stuff. Yeah. I don't know. I just don't get into, I don't know, going to Louisiana. Like, been to the Plains a million times, been to Neyland.
Louisiana. It's all about Louisiana.
It is, man. It's something in the water. I don't know.
I love it down there.
It's nuts. It's just nuts. I don't know what else to say about it, man. It's just nuts. There's so many good stories. We ought to actually talk about stories all week long.
Let's do that.
I've got a great one about my wife that I could share from the national championship, that if she ever watched one of our shows, she would kill me, but I'll tell you guys. So it's a really good one because
I had one of those
came out of nowhere.
I had one of those with Jake Coker about my father-in-law on one of these shows. Yeah. The show I just did, like the time that he got my ticket. But we'll just leave it here. One thing I want to tell you guys, though, newlifeart.com, time to pimp out your man cave. We're running a 10% off statewide. No exclusions through the end of the month. Free calendar with any Legacy Continues order. And you got to use Bama Tailgate when you go to checkout. And you'll get the 10% off. You'll get the calendar. And a roll tide to all you guys. Chad Anderson, I'm Mick Gillispie. Thanks for hanging out with us. We're going to be on here all week talking about Alabama football against LSU. This is your invitation to the party. If you didn't get it, now you did.